Ineffable DM here. In this video, I am going to show you cutout style RPG overlays to use in Fantasy Grounds and some map applications related to that we can do. We'll start with kind of my thought process when I'm going through and making a list. As I'm reading the module, I will write down characters that we're going to encounter that are in a non-combat setting and also what that setting is. This is for an adventure that I'm setting up currently in Fantasy Grounds, so we will use it as an example. We're going to use Roderick, the ugly, harried human blacksmith in his smithy shop, as an example of generating these images. I prefer to use Midjourney for that, so we will go ahead and kind of get into that. We will generate the background image first, so that is just going to be making a blacksmith shop, a poorer setting because this is a low-level campaign, dark stone floor. Let's add a large window to make it look nice. And then I like to add fantasy illustration to the stuff I make. It just kind of gives it a overall thematic link. And then I will set the aspect ratio to 16:9, which is a widescreen format, and it just helps fit on there later. For setting, blacksmith, large windows, fantasy illustrations, and we will generate that at the same time. I will go ahead and I will make a blacksmith. So let's make a ugly, lumpy. Lumpy? No, that's too much. That's too much. We'll do harried. An ugly, harried, medieval blacksmith with a large smithing hammer and a thick apron. Fantasy illustration. Alright, let's see what we got here. I like this one on the top right here. This looks like a good option. Right here, we'll save that to go to Photoshop here in a second. We'll see what comes out of our blacksmith here in a bit. Yeah, so the process we're going to do once these final images load here is we will get the last blacksmith. I like this guy right up here on the top. That sounds good. If you're ever having issues getting these to cut out, you can also generate them with a white background, which you can just put in the text prompt. That'll give you a little cleaner background to cut out. I use Photoshop, so it's not so much of an issue for me. I know there are some free options online. Alright, so now that we got our sample images here, I always like to start by loading whatever the background image was that we're going to do. I will convert this to a JPEG when I export it, which is basically the file export as. It just cuts down the size. By default, they generate it as a PNG, which is probably about 2 megs for this image, as opposed to 500K for the JPEG. It's just a lot shorter, a lot smaller size, quicker to get to the players, and it's less memory on the map for players who have kind of more restricted computers. So yeah, so now that we've got the background image, the next thing is we're just going to go ahead and we're going to bring in blacksmith into here. And Photoshop is nice because I have a remove background button, which works for most of the things that I would ever want to do. There are options online where you can upload them and they will send you back the files. I've used those before I really got into using these options on Photoshop, and so they are out there. I like to duplicate these layers once I have it cut out, because it's a layer and a mask over here, and then if you merge them together, it gets rid of the mask. I'm sure there's a better way to do that, but I am not quite that savvy yet. But if you know how, leave a comment, and I will read it and figure out how. Once we're over here on the map, because we generated these in the same size, you can see where I cut his knees off is sort of the cut off here. I think he would actually look better flip this way, and that's basically it. And then from the layers, I will actually check, if you click the image, make sure that it's trimmed so that there's not like wayward pixels or anything anywhere, and then you can export this as a PNG. And I just put these all into a folder in my Fantasy Grounds. I save them there directly as I'm making them. And then that's basically the function that you're going to have once you import them into Fantasy Grounds as well. It's like, you're like, oh, it's a blacksmith shop. Oh, it's the blacksmith. And then he talks to you as the blacksmith, and that's sort of the scene, as opposed to just saying you're at the blacksmith shop and saying you're talking to the blacksmith while you're looking at just like a token on the map, I guess. Or looking at nothing at all. This is an option that I like, and I got some good feedback on it, so I thought I would share it at the very least. Once we have our images made, I'll show you something that I've set up already in Fantasy Grounds and sort of the applications that I had for it and how we do that. So, I started with a welcome screen, and as far as the players go, I always recommend that if they upsize this twice, it will put it over most of their background, and then from their view, they can get these overlays kind of situated, and then if we need to like pop up another map or anything over it, it will always pop up over the over this background image. So if they have the null map, you're like, okay, this is cool, and it's over that. So just a good little tip there. I'm going to shrink it down for mine. It's easier to use for me, like this. Okay, so once we have this set up, we have our welcome screen. I always recommend using the book inside and moving all the information from the PDF for whatever you're doing into here, just because it's so much nicer to have this right here. I've named the various sections later to match these. So if you see over here, I have like an A1 tavern, a B2 beggar, a C3 blacksmith, and then over here in the story, I have the corresponding things with what happens at these various spots. So we'll kind of go through ones. We'll turn on Oriel's shop here. As you come in, there's 2 wolf pups under the table and stuff, and it's nice to see those right there. And then we can come in, and we will open the group up, and we turn on Oriel, who is the shop owner, and she's like, oh, please, adventurers, help me. I'm so old and frail. And you're like, okay, I guess we can help you, lady. And she's like, oh, splendid. And you're like, okay, splendid, whatever. And then she's like, I'm going to open a portal to someplace else. And she, opens this portal, and it's all magic-y, and then there's, all these effects, and people are like, oh, my God, are you Matt Mercer? And I'm like, no, I'm not Matt Mercer. Maybe. I might be working on it. I don't know. But, we move in the direction of the portal, go through the portal, and then you hit the next scene, which is a garden. I have moved the garden scene. So then, you're in the garden, and they're moving this, and then from the player's perspective, this is all, centered on the back of their thing, and it's kind of all immersive as they're doing it. So, moving on to the named sections of these, is I have found that instead of having the players just wander around a town haphazardly, I made another overlay map, the Zentighetto map here. So this shows kind of the options that were presented in the book for what the players could do, and I kind of just made the map and I made the things and put them in a map wherever I wanted. Made this all up as I was going. And as the players say, they're like, okay, well, let's go to A1. I would tick off A1 and I'd be like, okay, congratulations, you have found a tavern. And I kind of, over here in the campaign book, I hit A1 and I'm like, okay, the sign above this scorch mark building reads the bitter edge. And then I'll read this to the players section that I have set up here. And then various skill checks or whatever they can do there is also listed as we go through it. And that's nice because it kind of shows them that, and then I have oh, you've hit a thief and the various other things in red on here, and that really helped facilitate moving this forward. And then, as we went through the scenes, for example, if you hit the thief scene, you know, you would come back to the story overlay and you would get the thief scene to match whatever you had picked on there. So if you went to the tavern, you're like, oh, I'm going to the tavern, and then you meet the drunken dwarf. He's like, oh, I'm going to tell you things. I'm a drunken dwarf. This is what I know. And then, you know, if you go over to the tavern, you know, we have what they can know and stuff in the campaign we can go through. It kind of helps facilitate it. The other thing that I found was nice about it is they had this inn, and there was this like complicated card game they wanted to play with this guy called Terranville. So it's like I made this nice little rule overlay that kind of showed, you know, how to play the game, and then as they were playing the game, I had another overlay where I could do like the score tracker to keep track of it. That was well. I don't think that the game was necessarily that fun. You know, it was better like it was probably better at a con, but this was well enough. Yeah, and I mean that's pretty much it. Using those things, you know, getting the map together, getting the tokens, the overlays, and just kind of setting it up together, getting all of this together. I think, you know, keeping it on one thing here on the map overlays is the way to go. I think that having everything laid out in the book campaign so that you can read it right here really helps facilitate that aspect of it, and then just grouping everything and naming parts so that they're all linked together and you can go through them. It's really nice. And then, you know, for basically the entire campaign, it was, you know, this window or one of the battle maps, and you only needed the battle maps once or two, so you just kind of had the one in the background, this over it, switching back and forth. It worked well. Yeah, that's it for your consideration. Thank you.